Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have an exciting guest today, Katie Hill, former Congresswoman, but we're going to just take a minute and thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com, and we'll read a few next time. So Katie Hill is a former Congresswoman from California's 25th District. At 31, she was one of the youngest members of the historic freshman class that flipped the House and she also served as the vice chair for the House Oversight and Reform Committee and on the powerful House Armed Services Committee. Prior, Katie worked as executive director of PAC, which is People Assisting the Homeless, the largest homeless services organization in California. She resigned from Congress in 2019 over an admitted affair with a young female campaign staffer and over leaked nude photos. In 2020, she founded the PAC Her Time, whose mission is to help elect women and young people, the long-shot candidates who have the vision and drive needed to make lasting systemic change in America. She's also the author of the 2020 book, She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality. Katie, welcome to the back room.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start just for contextual purposes, and I don't want to dwell on it because I know you've spoken about it a million times and probably tired of hearing yourself talk about it. But the scandal, I know you've embraced that word over the last few years.
Yeah, what else can you say?
It is what it is. Although you did say, and this is a quote from somewhere, it was a smear campaign built around cyber exploitation. So I'll just sort of summarize real quickly, but I also want your take on it. You were in Congress, I think, for about a year, and you admitted to having an affair with a much younger female staffer on the campaign, not when you were actually a congressperson. And then there were some leaked nude photos that came out. And I think you were in the middle of a divorce with your ex-husband. And there's a whole story there in terms of the interaction between the two of you. And you've accused him of really being behind it, as well as GOP operatives being behind it to take you down in a way, in a very vengeful way.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. I would say that a couple of other important things to note is that the photos came out after my ex had threatened, to destroy me. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was just a couple of months after I had left him. It was also the first person who kind of broke the story or who said that the photos existed was actually the chair at that point of the local Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And then the quote unquote journalist who published the piece on a right-wing blog that published the photos had at one point been the campaign manager for one of my Republican opponents. Mm-hmm. So it was very clearly coming from that wing. And so I think, I just think that it's important to note. And then I sued, under a statute that is part of California law saying that you can't publish, nude photos of people without their consent. But it was ruled by the judge that First Amendment protections, kind of usurp that mm-hmm. law. So that mm-hmm. the law around, that protects people from revenge porn basically doesn't apply to public figures. And I think that there's a real problem with that because there's no solid definition for what a public figure is. And legal experts have said that this is something that's going to continue to come up. And my case has shown, real gaps in our ability to provide protection for people from this kind of thing happening to, millions of women across the country.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of,
and it can happen to men too. I mean, mm-hmm. I say that it does happen to men. It's just a lot more common happening to women.
It just seems bonkers that regardless of whether one is a public figure or not, nude photos without your express authorization to be released should not be okay.
Yeah, and it's a problem that's getting even worse. I've been involved in a group that's, it's becoming a global coalition to fight cyber exploitation and intimate image abuse. And it's become even worse because of deep fakes. And there's really so much that can happen. At Pornhub there's a lot of lawsuits with Pornhub because people have had basically revenge porn, posted, and millions of people have downloaded and viewed this horrible stuff that is, for years has destroyed people's lives. And it's just really, really problematic. And one of the things that I'm working on is trying to get a federal law passed to actually address this. And nothing's on the books. We've got state laws, but one of the problems that I had was in dealing with my case is that I was in Washington, D.C. when it happened, but the people who committed the act were in California. So the prosecutors in California had, issues with it. The prosecutors in D.C. had issues with it. And there's not a federal statute that addresses it. So we're trying to pass something called the SHIELD Act, which would make it a federal crime. But we have not been successful yet, even though we were very close last year. And so it's bipartisan. It's something that does have support across the aisle, but it just, there's one thing or another that has stopped it from actually making it through. And it's just one of those examples of legislation that is wildly popular and supported and just doesn't happen. And it's really frustrating.
The other surprising thing is that it is California, which is usually thought of as a progressive state, when it comes to pot and abortion and women's rights and all kinds of social issues, social justice issues. You would think that state would have been one of the first states to protect someone like you in terms of the release of photos like that.
Yeah, you would think so. And it was an early state to pass this statute to criminalize, cyber exploitation. But basically this one judge decided that it didn't apply to public figures, or that this First Amendment protection, superseded the other protections.
Right.
And I think that we had, the opportunity to appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had several people say that on appeal, I might have succeeded, but I didn't have any more money
Right.
to actually try to pursue that. Because the other thing is, it's called anti-SLAPP legislation. And that's basically it's meant to stop or prevent people from suing, journalists and media outlets, basically just frivolous lawsuits that would try to prevent them from publishing things that they don't, that others don't want published. Right. So that's the purpose for it. But part of what the deterrent is meant to do is that if you file a lawsuit and it's dismissed through this anti-SLAPP statute, it is you have to pay, the person who sues has to pay the legal fees of the entities that they sued. And so I was ordered to pay the legal fees for the Daily Mail and Red State and the others that I sued, which is, it ended up being hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't have that money. So I filed bankruptcy, and I just a few months ago had my bankruptcy discharged. So it's been quite a journey. And I feel like I'm finally coming out the other side of it. And I do not feel like there was any kind of justice. And I feel like a really problematic precedent was set. But I do feel like the public sentiment came out kind of on my side. I don't think that this is likely to happen to somebody else in the same way, I guess. I didn't get a lot of defense when it was happening, right? Most of the people in, my colleagues in the Democratic Party told me, privately, don't resign. You don't need to, just wait it out. But publicly, there were only a handful that really stood up for me. I think that if this happened to somebody else again, that would be different. So,
the timing, I'm trying to remember, because time goes so fast, with relation to Me Too. Was your case like right before or like
right after? It was
after.
Yep. So Me Too kind of like peak started in while I was campaigning. 2017, 2018 is when it really got going. And actually that was part of, I think, the problem, I guess there's a lot of problems, but complication with my case is that I did have a relationship with somebody who worked for me. Now, you mentioned that she was younger. She was a few years younger, but I was only 29 years old when I started running for Congress. So, it wasn't a huge age difference. Like she was, if she was in her early 20s, I was in my late 20s.
Right.
And it was something where, like, on a campaign, you're not, it's not the same kind of employer-employee relationship. It was, we were this grassroots campaign, got close to each other, and, things things happen, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, you do get close to the people that you work to sometimes, and affairs happen, relationships happen that are not appropriate, but like it just does. And I think that it was difficult because, boundaries. I should have had different boundaries, and I've been a boss and an employer for most of my career
Mhm.
in much larger settings, and I've never, I would never sleep with somebody who worked for me. But I think the adrenaline of a campaign, and I'm not trying to excuse it, because I've done
Mhm.
a whole apology tour,
Mhm.
and but I think that it's I've had to kind of grapple with it, and you ultimately have to find a way to live with yourself, and live with the choices that you made and the
Sure.
mistakes you've made.
But look, the truth
Um,
is you were a young
yeah,
bisexual Democrat in Congress.
yeah.
And there were a lot of people that didn't like that hat trick. You know what I mean? And
hmm
so
hmm
that's not
And I
even
was rising in power.
uh,
I was already on leadership. I was already, an
mhm,
elected member of the leadership team. I was vice chair of Oversight, part
mhm.
of impeaching Trump,
You really
and
are.
I was a target because of that. The other
Mhm.
thing is that, AOC and as they've referred to them, I guess I don't know if they still do, because there's so many more young progressives that are in Congress now. But at the time, the squad, I was sort of, I wasn't quite part of that, because I was in a purple district. I was in a district that, once I left, went back to a Republican. It had always been with a Republican. It was briefly held by a Democrat with me, and then it went back to a Republican. But I think one of the reasons that I was such a target is because they knew no matter what they did to AOC or any of the other members of the squad, they weren't going to be able to get that seat back. They weren't going to be able to get a Republican elected in one of those districts. But in mine, they could, and they
Mhm.
did. And I think that it shows you that these sort of smear tactics, they're willing to do anything to
Mhm.
win. And we have to remember, we're not, right, Democrats, that we don't do that kind of stuff. We don't
Mhm.
play dirty in the same way. And I think that I don't think we should. I'm not in any way advocating for us to approach politics in the same disgusting kind of way, but we do have to remember that they will. And
Well, it's that whole,
it's
like, do you show up at a gunfight with a knife? You may not
right,
want
right,
to, but if you wanna
right,
survive, then you gotta show up with
right,
a gun. You can't just
right.
pontificate about righteousness as you're getting
Yeah,
shot to death.
yeah.
We just don't Democrats, we don't play that game. And Republicans know that. They know that they can do whatever the hell they want, no matter how dirty, and when the Democrats take charge, they'll never play as dirty. It's a
No, they won't.
win-win for them.
Yeah, and you think about people like Matt Gaetz, right? Who, and I don't know why he wasn't charged. I do know that federal prosecutors are extremely cautious about
Mhm.
actually doing charges, but you know, it like he did all these horrible things. There was just as much proof of that, and nobody. He didn't even get the slightest pressure to resign.
Mhm.
There's no way he
Well,
could
this is
resign.
actually what I wanted to ask you because history provides context and perspective that we didn't have in 2019 or 20. So, with people like Matt Gaetz, with Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trump admitting to grabbing pussies, all the shit that these guys do you look back on that resignation? And you can answer why you resigned. I don't want to take that away from you, but do you look back on that resignation and go, yep, shouldn't have done it? Shouldn't have done it. Not with
I
what
have had
we
moments.
accept today from the other side or what they accept today.
I definitely have my moments. I think that, truthfully, why I resigned was because those images, and when you think about image-based sexual abuse and all, like, that whole epidemic of revenge porn and cyber exploitation and all of it, the number of people who become suicidal in the aftermath of it is really massive. More than half of victims have said that they've become suicidal afterwards, and I was one of those.
Mm.
And especially having become so high profile, having so many people see this, right? It's not just like I was a person that I was quote unquote just a person that had this scene, and nobody really knew who I was except for friends and family, which I don't want to minimize at all. That's devastating. I know people who have literally changed their name and moved across the country and tried to, I mean, it's ruined their lives. But for me, it was like I genuinely didn't feel like I could go out and people, and show my face in public without people seeing, or, without knowing that people have seen this, and, seen known the most embarrassing parts of my life. And it truly just devastated me. And I didn't feel like I could go on, doing my job. So it was very personal. And Nancy Pelosi even called me twice when I told her I was resigning, and said, please don't resign. She was like, even if you just wait till the next election, or if you, hold off until the end of the year or whatever, like, right. And I couldn't see myself like going back to work and trying to, go back to my district and face any of it. It just felt like too much. And truthfully, I hid out. I really hid out afterwards. And then, on top of everything else, my brother died of fentanyl poisoning, just a couple of months after this, this happened. And I have a lot of guilt about that, because he relapsed with drugs. And I feel like what happened with me had something to do with it. But I guess so all that to say, like, my choice to resign was personal as much as anything else, or more than anything else. But I have several times looked back and thought, like, if I could have stuck it out, I think I probably honestly could have gotten reelected. I think I probably pushed through it, and
Well, the truth is,
people last with scandals.
yeah, well, there's another scandal next week, the week after, and the truth is, just like with Al Franken, like, it would have blown over, and good people left Congress. Good people left Congress, and really bad people moved in.
And, yeah, and I think on that side, they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep sending worst people.
So will you run again? Will you run again?
I haven't written it off, but I had a baby, and that's one of the best things that, it is the best thing that's ever happened in my life.
Congrats.
And thank you. He's 15 months old now. And I honestly, like, I don't think that could have happened if I were still in Congress, just because, I don't know that it would have been in the cards. And it was a surprise and an accident, and but a beautiful thing. And I know, and I support women who run for office with kids, but it's knowing the sacrifices and the amount of work that it takes, and, the travel and the amount of time that you have to spend away from home. It's not something I want to do while he's little. It is something that I think I would consider again when he's a little bit older. But there's so much, like, everything goes by so fast. He's growing up so fast right now, and I just don't want to miss anything. So I'm holding it off for now. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts, and maybe in a few years I'll consider it. But I haven't written it off, which is sometimes when I say that, my family thinks I'm crazy to even consider re-entering politics after what happened. And I guess I think I'm crazy too sometimes, that I haven't just totally turned my back on all of it. But I truly believe that, if we want to change things, it's the only way we can. Like, you hate it or not. It's really,
that's right.
You have to change policies, and you have to get power to be able to do that. And so you need to have the right people to, and I'm not saying that, like, I am the answer, right? But I know that we need to get people who know what they're doing, and who believe in the right things, and who are going to prioritize the right things. And maybe I'm one of them.
I mean, for the most part, if you take out and I'm going to call it your personal life, because the truth is, today, most people don't give a shit who someone sleeps with, who they have a child with. None of that. 3/4 of the country has way moved on, and they don't care. LGBTQ, we've all embraced it, and we all have people in our family who are queer and trans, and so if you take that part out of your biography, you are the Democrats' dream candidate. But it would be great to see you back at some point. I want to talk to you about Her Time. So this is what you did after, kind of right after you left Congress. You created this PAC called Her Time. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I decided so I had raised money for my reelection and I needed to do something with it. So I turned it into a political action committee that was basically to focus on electing and reelecting women, especially young women, who were going to prioritize policies that benefited young women. And I, frankly, that became even more important as we, saw and as I always feared with Roe being overturned. But the two elections after I left, we supported a number of congressional candidates. The 2020 cycle was rough. As you know, Democrats did not perform as well as we should have. But the 2022 cycle, we did pretty well. And all of our frontline candidates, except for one, were reelected, which I'm really proud of. And we were able to help mobilize young women in districts across the country. And now, we are raising money again. We spent all the money to try and reelect people last time, and now we're raising again so that we can focus. I actually am hoping to really focus on my former district, because I think that it's not a district that should be held by a Republican. It was won by Hillary and Biden. It was, obviously I won it by 8 points. And it's even more Democratic now with redistricting than it was when I won. So it should absolutely be held by a Democrat. And it's one of the most important districts for Democrats to win back the House next cycle, next year. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do to focus on that. But I genuinely believe that young people and women are the reason that that Democrats are going to be able to win, across the country and in swing districts. We're going to be focusing on primarily that district, especially because, I'm still well known there, and I think that I can have an impact in helping mobilize.
And it seems like it's such a perfect time to do that because of the Republican culture wars that are taking place, the war on women. I mean, everybody is screaming, "Get out of my vagina!" Like I scream it, and I don't even have one. You know what I mean? So it's just like enough of this trans kitty litter in bathroom. It's like they've gone off the deep end, and I think the more we can do as a party on the grassroots level to get more women, young women, more people of color, women of color, more representative of who we are as a society.
I believe that if we change the face of power in the face of politics, then we're going to be able to change, what comes out of it, right? And I think if frankly, if you just have old white men in power, we're going to get the same policies that we've had for decades. And we have to change that. So, if I'm not going to say that all women are great. Clearly, the right has shown that that's that's not the case.
And not all old white men are bad.
Right. That is very true. That is very true.
I speak for the older white guy.
We have a lot of allies. I don't know if you're quite old, but
oh, thank you. I kind of fed you that, hoping that's what you'd say. So I'm 63. So
but absolutely, like it's. But it's truly, representation does matter. It's not the only thing that matters, but it's vitally important. And I think that we have to have parity. I think that we should have, if women make up half the country, then they should make up half of Congress. And if people of color make up whatever percentage they do, then that's what it should look like. And we need to be able to invest in the areas, because candidates don't have the same advantages, right? Like old white men are the ones that have the most money in our country, and they're able to pump money into their campaigns, and they're able to, not work for a year or two while they run for Congress, which is a huge barrier for the regular people who are the most valuable for us to be able to actually elect.
Or they're not running, taking care of a small child.
Right, exactly. And I think that that's those are all things that we have to address. They're not solutions. The solutions are not easy. They're not ones that are going to come, not a single PAC is going to be able to address them, but they're ones that people need to be aware of and working collectively towards. Yeah. So I think that we're moving in the right direction, and you can see how, especially on the Democratic side, really we are seeing changes. Like the people who are getting elected, we have the first Gen Z person.
Florida,
Yes,
Maxwell Frost.
Yeah, Maxwell Frost. Yeah. So we had him elected. We've got, I mean, there's just now I don't even remember all their names. I would love to see them and see so many more of them. Right. Like it's incredible that's what's actually happening. And I think that it's a real testament to the former leadership on the Democratic side, like that Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer stepped back and said, okay, we're giving the opportunity to the next generation of people to take the lead here, because they didn't have to. They didn't. They would have. I can tell you right now, Nancy Pelosi, if she said no, I want to stay in charge, like she would have. It would have happened, and I think that it's pretty powerful to see that changing of the guard, and it's going to keep happening. So we have to keep pushing for that, and I honestly believe that the Republican Party is going to become obsolete. It's the only. I don't think they're going to be able to recover from this madness.
My hope is that young people of color, but in particular young people, that if they are engaged and they vote, they can have everything they want. We've seen the state of Michigan completely flip. We've seen what happened in Wisconsin, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Young people in Tennessee, if you're so pissed off, which you should be, and you want change, all you got to do is vote. Because in this country right now, maybe 55%, somewhere between 55 and 60% of Democrats vote. Just think of 70% voted. Just think of 70% of young people voted. We can have everything we want as a party.
Yep.
It's
and
that
I've
simple.
Said that was, I mean, that's what I campaigned on, was that like if young people and women vote in the numbers that can really have an impact, then everything changes. Truly, everything changes. And I think that we're going to see that more and more. And I'm so, it's horrible that it took so much tragedy to mobilize this generation, right? Like, the school shootings and Roe v. Wade being overturned and, everything like that. But I think that Gen Z is they're the ones that are they're gonna change this. And I'm thrilled to kind of, I do feel like I was on the early end of, I mean, I was one of the youngest women ever elected, but I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to continue to hold that title. Like there are going to be a lot more young women that are elected. And I think that that's what we need to see. And I'm really excited that that's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And if I get elected again, I want to be one of the old ones.
Well, one of our episodes that we taped that's up this week is with former Congresswoman Elizabeth Holtzman. And she was the youngest woman ever elected to Congress when she was elected. And she held that title for like 42 years. And then she ran again in 2022. I mean, just in the last election. We talked about it, and I asked her what made you run again. She still had the same fire in the belly about all the issues that mattered then to her. Racism, women's rights. Congress needs people, regardless of age, but people who are engaged and more importantly, can engage the electorate. And to your point, someone like Hakeem Jeffries, House Minority Leader, if he and the party can really galvanize young people of color in Tennessee vote crazy. I mean, just think about what can happen to that state. It's within our grasp. We have the power. It's the one day of the year where the janitor and the billionaire have the same exact power. And so the more we can get rid of that mentality in people of like, oh, my vote doesn't count, blah, blah, blah. I think you're right. I think people, and especially young people, are starting to see that their vote really counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you feel like you're part of a collective, right? When you're part of a movement for change, I do think that matters. That makes a difference. And I feel like that's kind of where we need to keep pushing. And I think it's happening. And I feel like it's out of necessity. People are looking at the world and, climate change and so many issues that are just like, if we don't do something now, what is going to happen? I'm looking at the future my kid's going to grow up into, and I'm like, it's our responsibility to try and fix this, to try and do something. And I think that a lot of people are feeling that way.
Well, folks, if you want to hear more about Katie's life, her book, She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality, can be had. Why don't you tell us where people can look for Her Time?
Her Time is her-time.com. And you can subscribe to our email list. I know that emails are really annoying, but they do keep you apprised of all the different things that are going on and action alerts and, petitions. And obviously we're asking for money, but small amounts make a huge difference, even if it's only a couple dollars whenever you can. Where our average donation, I think, is $8, which is huge.
The cost of a Twitter verification.
Yeah, right. And
Right.
God, yeah, don't pay for that. But the right has the money, and they've got the billionaires, and they've also got like the scammers. They've got the grifters, and so we got to be able to fight back. And unfortunately, it takes money to be able to do that. It takes money to be able to communicate, to be on the airwaves, to do the ads, to be on social media, and to one of the reasons that people don't vote is because they don't know the importance of their district. Like one of the biggest motivators for people to vote in our district was like, this is actually one of the most important districts to be able to flip the House. Like when they were like, oh, this one actually matters, then they would show up and vote. And so letting people know and letting people know who their representative is and why they're bad, all of that it takes communication, and that's why it costs money. So if you don't have to skip your latte, but if you think about the cost of an upgrade of your latte and you kick a couple bucks in here and there, then it does make a difference.
Yeah, well, don't send the money to Elon Musk. Send it to Katie Hill. Katie, you've been very generous.
Doesn't come to me, just to be clear.
Well, the PAC.
Yeah.
Katie is not Steve Bannon. It's not going to go in her pocket.
I have a day job still working on homelessness, which was what I was doing before Congress, and I'm doing it again. So.
Well, thanks for coming on. You've been very generous with your time. I hope you'll come back, and I do hope you'll run again someday. So thank you for coming on.
So much.
Take care.
Nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
Bye.
That's episode 65. If you like what you've been hearing, and even if you don't, let us know. We appreciate the feedback. You can leave us a message at 845-307-7446. Email us at backroomandy@gmail.com or tweet to me at Andy Ostroy. And when you listen, please take a quick moment to rate and review. It's very helpful. I want to thank my co-producer, engineer, and editor, Maddie Rosenberg, associate producer, Jen Hammoud, Cricket Langell for our artwork, Andy Hollander for our kick-ass music, Patricia Wind and the Epicurean for the Backroom Studio, and a big thank you again to our guest, Katie Hill. So keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and we hope you'll join us again next time. Have a great week.